I just generally what I would like to say is that I think one thing what sisters do and men do as well is that marriage meetings, they're very stiff with them. Like people, they treat it like an interview for a job, and that's not correct. And the thing is that when you do things like that, you know, a guy can just play around and give you just whatever answers are pleasing to you, right? The key is to actually have a discussion with the guy. Does that make sense? To actually have a discussion. And at a marriage meeting, it's not haram for you to have a chat with this guy now, because your mahram is present at the very least, if not your guardian, which is the preferred situation. And there really isn't a chance for inappropriateness. So now you can have a conversation. The issue is that women, they don't conversate, and the men, they don't conversate. They just treat it like, I'm here to ask. Like it's even necessarily wrong for like the only thing that ever comes up when it comes to marriage meetings is what question should I ask? That's wrong. It's not just there for you to ask questions. It's not like it's not a business meeting. It's not an interview for a job. Do you see what I'm saying? Because questions can be, of course, I'm not saying don't ask questions. Some questions are important to ask. Some questions are important to ask, and you've got to. Some things are specific, they're pressing. And every marriage meeting should have questions that are asked. But one thing that is missing from marriage meetings is conversation. You know why that's important? Because when you're conversating with him, things will slip out. Things will become apparent. Because you've now taken him off his guard. Does that make sense? And you've brought him into his comfort zone where he's normal. You've brought him into a place where he's being normal with you now. And of course, the same with you. Like things, like you let out who you really are. They say a person cannot fake someone else's walk for very long until eventually they just fall into their own walk. Does that make sense? Like me, I'll give you an example, yeah? I don't know if it's a good example, but you know, sometimes I get invited to universities, right? And we have to talk to atheists and whatnot. And obviously the university is not a place to kind of, you know, speak slang and so on and so forth. So I try my best to just, you know, be as eloquent with my speech as possible, to just, you know, be as grammatically correct as possible. But then it just comes out halfway through. I just think, forget it. And I just be like, yo, what's up? I fall into who I really am. Does that make sense? And that happens with people. Like, you will just fall into who you really are. So when you have a conversation, like, he will slip up. Like, when I say slip up, not necessarily in a bad way, it might be something good that slips out from him. The point is that the real him will become apparent very, very quickly. Does that make sense? And that way, you'll be able to identify. But now here's the thing. If you don't know who you really are, and what you really want from marriage, and what you really do not want, then he can slip up all he wants. It's not going to present a red flag to you. Does that make sense? So you need to go into the marriage meeting knowing what you want in a man and what you don't want in a man. Does that make sense? Only then, when it becomes apparent in conversation, you'll be like, hold up, actually, I'm not feeding this brother at all. Does that make sense? Also, be open to having multiple marriage meetings. I'm not saying at the same time, but just generally, be open to it. Shall I tell you why? Because I noticed that through various marriage meetings, you actually get to realize that there were things that you thought you wanted that you don't want, and there were things that you thought you didn't want that you actually do. Does that make sense? But you don't realize it till you see it live in the flesh in front of you. Oh, okay. So for example, you might be like, I want to marry a guy who you know, is a student of knowledge, right? But when you go to a marriage meeting with him, and you're realizing, this brother's telling me I'm busy half the year, I travel, I go to this country, that country, I'm seeking knowledge, I spend half the year or 2/3 of the year outside the country. You're like, you know what, I actually don't want that. I actually don't want that. I want a student of knowledge who maybe has already done his studying, or he studies local. Or, do you see what I'm saying? So in the beginning you go in with, oh yeah, I want a student of knowledge. Oh yeah, why not? And when you actually meet him and you realize what it means to marry a student of knowledge, you're like, you know what? Maybe that's a bit intense. Does that make sense? So you learn through going to marriage meetings. I feel like some people are just like on this, like they just will not have marriage meetings unless the guy seems to be absolutely perfect. Like, you might not even realize you actually like that. You actually like that in a guy. But obviously, when I say marriage meeting, I'm not talking about linking them up for a coffee and Costa or something like that. I'm talking about your guardian is there. If not your guardian, then at least a mahram is there to chaperone that meeting, if that makes sense. Yeah? Hope that answers the question. No, the chaperone doesn't have to lead the conversation because he's not marrying the boy, is he? No. I mean, look, everyone's different. Some women might be a bit shy and they prefer the chaperone to get started or whatever have you. The point there is that really it's not the chaperone's meeting. the wali, the guardian, will have his own meeting with the boy. He'll grill the boy, he'll look at the boy, he'll examine him top to down. He has to have his own meeting with the boy. Does that make sense? But we're talking about a meeting where a boy and a girl are here to get to know each other. Does that make sense? So of course the guardian might talk as well, but the point here is that this is their show. This is their time to see if they see any possibility for affection, or if they find any affection amongst themselves, or if they find a compatibility or an attraction amongst themselves. Does that make sense? So it's for them to have that conversation. Does that make sense? And the chaperone, he sits where he can see and he can hear what's taking place, but he doesn't have to be like over the guy's shoulder or over the girl's shoulder. Maybe they're on a table and he could be at the other end of the table, or maybe he could be on the table across them, or maybe they could be sitting opposite each other at the table, and he's like, you know what I'm saying, he's there but not like a monkey on top of the guy's back, that could maybe make him feel a bit uncomfortable. And it's about just having that conversation. Some girls might not feel comfortable with their dad being at the meeting, so they have their brother at the meeting with them, or no problem, inshallah ta'ala, if you feel more comfortable in that regard. But the point is, you find a mahram that you feel comfortable with, basically just have a marriage meeting, inshallah, you get to know the guy. Does that make sense? And you can lead that conversation. So make the questions like normal, like bring them into the conversation. Like for example, if your questions are about family, about career, speak to him about his career. It will become clear to you. Speak to him about his family. It will just become clear to you. And then at the end of it, you could say, look, I have some questions that I feel like maybe are unanswered. Do you mind if I just put it out? And no one's going to say no to that. But it's just that at least there was a conversation. I think the problem is that most people don't know how to make conversation. Shall I give you some conversation tips? Yeah. Do you don't want to hear some conversation tips, yeah? Okay, 4 things. If you talk about them, your conversation will never disintegrate in a bad way. Number 1, family. Family is always a good thing to make conversation about. Are you the youngest? Are you the oldest? Your family lives with you? They don't live with you? And then you know what's good is that, you see, by the way, now a guy responds, he says, I'm not the oldest, no. I'm the middle child, for example. Yeah? Now, some people just move on to the next question. Oh, okay. What's your dad? It's like, that's going back into that interview form. So you have to make a comment, make a statement. Oh, okay, mashallah, middle. Yeah, I always wondered what it would be like to be a middle child. I just make a comment on everything he says. No, I'm an only child. Oh, really? I'm an only child too. Oh, yeah. How did you keep yourself busy when you were a kid? Like, you didn't have siblings to play with. Or, you say, oh, you're an only child. I wish I was an only child. Obviously, don't say I wish I was an only child, because your siblings are a blessing. But you know what I mean? Like, have a comment. Like, give a comment to the answer that they just made, so a conversation can develop. So the first thing is family, and family is something everyone kind of likes to talk about. They don't mind talking about it. Does that make sense? The second thing is occupation, your job. And occupation is something that we spend 45% of our lives doing. You know that, right? 45% of our lives we spend with our work. Now the question here is, and it's really important, is that if there was ever a thing to make a conversation run, it would be their occupation. Because that's what the guy does day in, day out. Does that make sense? So just get this. That's a way to start a conversation. The other thing is recreation. Okay? Now what hobbies? What do you do in your spare time? Does that make sense? And the third thing is dreams, aspirations. What would you like to do? What would you like to do? What are your dreams? What are your ambitions? And you can remember these 4 things with the acronym FORD. F-O-R-D. F for family, O for occupation, R for recreation, and D for dreams. I'll repeat it one more time. FORD. F for family, O for occupation, R for recreation, and D for dreams. And these are 4 things that whenever you get into a situation where you think there's an awkward silence or the conversation's just getting a bit dead, you can pull them out. Because these are all things that generally people like to talk about, and people have a lot to say on those issues. Family, come on, talk about family for days. Occupation, that's what I spend all my day doing. Recreation, when I'm not working, that's what I'm doing. Dreams is what I'd like to do. And it's easy stuff. And through that, you get to know a lot about a person. Even like Shar'an, you want to know what his family's like, because his family's a reflection of him. His occupation, you want to know what, that tells you a lot. Recreation, it's telling you who he is. You're actually getting to know him. And it's not so robotic. And a lot of your questions, if you notice, are probably about these 4 things anyway. And you'll be able to bring him in somehow, some way. Does that make sense? And if not, you can just slap him on top. And I hope that answers your question.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question for you. From all of my videos online that you might have seen, which one has been the most life-changing one for you so far? Many people told me that it was the video when we gave da'wah outside the Shisha Cafe.
And I'll leave you with this. The Prophet ﷺ said, a time will come when holding on to my religion, holding on to Islam, will become as difficult as holding on to charcoal. The charcoals that we smoke shisha with. The Prophet said, try and hold on to it. It burns you, let go of it. The Prophet ﷺ said, that's what my religion will become like. Is it not like that today?
Or perhaps you're from those who said it was that lecture that everyone was asking about, the one I did on the issue of death.
Send me back. Please send me back. I'll pray this time. I'll dump that girl this time. I won't play around with the girls no more. No more cigarettes, no more weed, no more watching things online, no more talking to the guys, no more music, no more disrespecting my parents. I will pray. Allah, please send me back. Tell these angels, hold me down for a second. Send me back. Just 2 minutes. Send me back. Oh, let me die with my head on the ground in sajda. Let me die. But Allah said, no. You will not be able to return. They will scream, Rabbi irji'uni. Send me back my master, please.
Or maybe it was one of the other 1,000 plus videos that we have online. Whatever it was, I want to ask you a follow-up question. And that is, I want you to remember and record what life was like before you saw that video, when you were distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when you're thinking of that and remembering that, I want you to be aware that there are many brothers and sisters who are still living life like that, far and distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They still haven't seen that one video that's going to help change their life. They haven't seen that one reminder that's going to touch them and bring them out from the darkness of sin to the brightness and the light and the happiness of guidance. But that doesn't mean that there isn't hope for them. They just need to come in contact with that kind of content online. And that's why myself and my team are dedicating the next 3 months, inshallah ta'ala, to flooding the internet with as much content on Tawheed and Sunnah and reminders about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as possible. But the issue is that in order for us to reach those targets, we're limited in terms of the resources that we have. We need to hire more people in our media team. We need to also buy new equipment. Now look, I am going to ask you to support this financially, but I'm not going to ask you for crazy numbers. For us, we don't need that kind of money. We need little money because we have a team that really believes in this. And the proof is in the pudding. If you see what we've done over the last summer, subhanAllah, you can see that the work, it gets done. That money goes where it deserves to be placed. So I'm going to ask you, inshallah ta'ala, because you're a person who's benefited from this YouTube channel. You're a person who's benefited from my video. I want you to be able to give the gift of that video that helped change your life to someone else by donating at the link below. And remember, the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you will truly believe until you love for your brother, by extension your sister, what you love for yourself, and what you love here for them is what guidance, the way you love it for yourself. So please, inshallah ta'ala, give it the link below and let's flood the internet with La ilaha illallah.